Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Political Vigilante Library Edition. I'm Graham Elwood, and I'm here with Jennifer Briney, who runs the Congressional Dish. We're here in a conference room in a publicly funded library to keep the socialism fresh and hot for this show. We went right to a library. It's free. It's a free conference room. And you can see all these lovely citizens studying and getting better. Look at that. That's what your public money funds.
Our tax dollars at work.
Look at them. Isn't this great?
Go government.
Go. I don't think anyone's ever said that before on this show. Okay, so Jennifer, why don't you tell everybody first of all what Congressional Dish is,
Sure.
where they can find it, and then we'll go into some of the you kind of unpack a lot of bills that have been passed, and we can go into like what are your biggest like, oh boy, they snuck this in there.
Yeah. Well, thank you for having me, first of all. Congressional Dish is a podcast, so you can find it anywhere podcasts are found, including iHeartRadio and Spotify and Apple and Google Play and all that. But basically, I started this 5 years ago because I wanted to know what they were doing with my tax money and in my name. And I had looked into the congressional record because I saw something weird on C-SPAN. There was a representative from Oklahoma that went and slipped something into an energy and water bill that protected secret campaign contributions. So I saw this on C-SPAN. I went, there's no way. He actually did that and bragged about it. There's no way. So that's the first time I looked into the record to be like, did that actually happen or am I insane? And it actually happened. So I started looking more regularly and I was finding all kinds of stuff that just wasn't getting covered. Because the most shocking part of that is I turned on the TV. I was like, Rachel Maddow has to be talking about this, or someone has to. No one was. There were no blogs even. There was no articles. Nothing. It was like it didn't even happen. So then I asked myself, how often does this happen? It turns out it happens all the time. And, you know, I'm not talented at a lot of stuff, but legislation doesn't scare me for whatever reason. So I started reading it and started a podcast, and it turns out other people want to know this stuff too.
So let me ask you this before we get to your what stuff you've noticed recently. How much of your information have you gotten from your listeners? I say that because the people that watch this show have kept me. I've learned so much from the people that watch the show as much as I think I've educated them. So how much of information have you gotten from people that are like as studious as you are with this?
As far as what's in the bills, it's usually me finding it. But the background information, that's where I get fed stuff on Twitter, especially. Someone will be like, hey, Jen, you had to see this. There was something stuffed in the last government funding bill that one of my listeners put on my radar. Didn't quite know what he was talking about, but then as I was able to get more details, he was the first one to be like, hey, keep an eye out for this thing, this intelligence-related thing. And so when something did come across my Twitter feed, I clicked on it because someone had fed me, you know, the seed that made me wonder, like, what are you talking about? But yeah, the going back and forth and, you know, following Congress, I have to follow every single subject, which is hard. And so it's kind of fun to have someone, they're paying attention to the ones that they were the most interested in. So they'll give me the follow-up information too, which is good. So like I did an episode on something called FirstNet a couple months ago, and it was supposed to be after 9/11. We were supposed to have an emergency responder network so that the firefighters and the police officers and everyone who comes can talk to each other. So like the walkie-talkies were supposed to be able to talk. Well, what that got twisted into after 15 years is we just gave $7 billion to AT&T. So AT&T's network is our emergency responder network, and no one's talking about this. So as more states are signing up...
I'm sure it was an oversight. I'm sure it was not the telecommunications company pushing that through.
Oh, no.
No, why would
they want $7 billion of our tax money?
To control the communications of people in an event of emergency.
Yeah, talk about too big to fail. They're our emergency network now. So,
Ooh.
Yeah, so that's trouble. And have you heard about that on the news?
No, I believe I've heard about Russia. I know that's been discussed, but I think,
yeah, a little bit.
And then it's funny. It's so interesting because every time there's something like that, usually. So when Trump did the whole shithole thing and everyone was up in arms, obviously racist remark. He's an asshole. But while that was happening, that was when Nancy Pelosi and 50 some other Democrats extended the NSA surveillance that was set up by Bush, that was extended by Obama.
Yep.
So it's just like anytime there's there's a Trump tweet that everyone's all bent out of shape about. I'm like, oh, what awful piece of legislation are they passing now?
Absolutely. That's exactly how it goes. What do they want us to look at over here? That's when I go straight to the bills.
What bills have you seen lately that had something in there where you're like, why and who put this in there?
Yeah, those would be the government funding bills. Those are the ones I'm paying the most attention to because our government was supposed to be funded on September 30th. So we're now 5 months into the fiscal year and we still don't have that money appropriated the way it's supposed to be. So what happens is they push it off by a few weeks every time. So they did, the first one went until December 8th, then they did another one until December 22nd, and then another one until January 19th. And every time they do one of those little bills, they put other stuff in there just to let it hitchhike into law. I call it dingleberries because I'm classy like that. So, I'm
independent media, folks. This is what
gotta have fun with this stuff, or else you'll kill yourself. So.
Oh yeah, yes. That'll be in another video.
Yeah. So that's what I've been watching is just all of these temporary funding laws. People are like, oh, thank God the government's funded, but they don't pay attention to the dingleberries. So one of the craziest things I've seen in a while is on the December 22nd government funding law. Mm-hmm. They attached emergency funding for missile defense. So what that means is that where the rest of the government has to operate without being able to start new projects, there was one specific project, which was $200 million for missile defense in Fort Greely, Alaska. And so I talked about the whole history of that, but it was basically a base that we used to intimidate Russia during the Cold War. We're saying it's for North Korea, but like, it's right next to Russia. So I don't know, I find that all kinds of shady, but there was $4 billion, right? And so that's appropriated specifically for missile defense. Well, in the last government funding law, the one that was signed on January 22nd, the one that ended the shutdown, they did this thing where they said that money, that specific $4 billion, can be shifted into intelligence and they can use it for things that haven't been authorized by Congress. So we basically just gave Donald Trump a $4 billion blank check. And the head of the Senate Intelligence Committee, Richard Burr, who was like best friends with the intelligence community, he went on the Senate floor and said, this is a really bad idea. I want to take this out of this bill, but if one person objected, then it would stay in the bill. And the head of the Appropriations Committee, Thad Cochran, there's an H in there, I think it's a Thad, but Senator Cochran of Mississippi, he objected, and he's the government funding guy. And so it made it into law. So Trump now has this blank check from now until February 8th for the intelligence community. I have no idea what they're going to do with it. So I don't know if it's still going to missile defense. I don't know how much they're going to shift.
I tell you what, it's funny that you bring that up because I've done numerous stories on how the NSA has been given free reign. They can do whatever they want. They don't need congressional approval on anything, and it's because of stuff like this. Mm-hmm. And then it's always fighting terrorism or keeping us safe, and so then now they're just given $4 billion to do with whatever they want, and they can watch any of us. They can look at any of our emails, and then it's always under this. And then it's not surprising it was connected to missile defense because the thing that has been so obvious with Trump and his cabinet is it's like the deep state or the military-industrial complex, whatever you want to call it, just said, oh, we're going to just double down on military. Cold War, so now Russia's an enemy again. Mm-hmm. And China's in bed with North Korea, and North Korea is wanting peace so badly that they now are going to the peace table with South Korea because we won't hear it.
Yeah.
So that stuff doesn't surprise me at all, and it shows me like how everything is sort of connected back. It's all back to the same thing, which is like the military and oil and
economics.
Yeah, and economics.
Because we pretty much throw out the government through more overt or covert ways, but we overthrow governments that do not participate in the economic system we're trying to set up. That's the pattern that I keep watching. So like, Libya, you look at Gaddafi, at the time he was the head of the African Union, I think is what they were calling it. And they were talking about having their own currency that was disconnected from the dollar. They were talking about shifting it to a gold-based currency, and boom, he's gone. Oh,
that you are putting a bullseye on your forehead if you say we're getting rid of the dollar, the petrodollar. Saddam said it, and Gaddafi said it. Now, these are not nice guys. These are people who've done a lot of awful things.
Sure.
But there's dozens, if not hundreds of others who play ball. And like, how many awful people have we backed?
Yeah.
That we've backed because, hey, they're
I
playing.
remember one. His name was Saddam Hussein.
Oh, that's right. When he fought Iran in the 80s. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. He was on our team, and then he wasn't, and he had to be taken out of power.
Because we backed the Shah of Iran, who tortured people.
Yes.
Seems like this is all connected. These are separate stories. There's no, shh, don't listen. None of this is connected.
Yeah.
Yeah, isn't it just insane? And it always seems to come, the thing I've learned from doing this show just in the last year, I thought it was really complicated. It's actually not.
No.
It's all, because once you know, like you said, once you know it's all about just American military and corporate interests, as long as, and the military is a massive corporation. So once you know that that's the goal and the movement that moves and motivates everything, then it's like, oh, it all makes sense.
Yeah. I always watch IMF reforms. I'm now obsessed with these because the International Monetary Fund, anytime we give a country money or we send them help and train and assist missions, all this stuff, the thing that they have to do in order to get us go away or to get our money is they have to reform their laws. So the IMF goes in there and says, yeah, you can have these billions of dollars as long as you change your laws to allow multinationals in to get your resources and to set up shop here. And so I'm obsessed with watching these reforms, and it's in every country. Every country that we're involved in, the IMF is there trying to get them to change their laws. It's all about making their economy fit this multinational thing. And that's what I'm so upset about. It's like, what are we paying for? Is it to keep us safe? It's like, no, it's to open up markets for multinational corporations. That's the game. And then we're the muscle. We're paying to make sure that these countries stay in line. And I didn't sign up for that. You know, that's not what I want to pay taxes for.
Well,
but the pattern is consistent.
right. The IMF thing, wow, that's a great point. I wasn't aware of that. Or I mean, I kind of was, but I haven't done as much research on that. Sounds like you're a godless hippie. If I'm hearing this right, and you hate America, maybe I heard it wrong. But
I hate people dying in my name.
Yeah.
That's the part I hate.
Yeah, that's the thing that's so troublesome for me is just like, oh, we're the bad guys. We were raised to believe we're the heroes and, oh, we had a couple missteps in Vietnam or whatever. But then you look back and you go, oh, man. It's almost why every year there's always some big epic World War II movie. And these are well-made movies, but it's always to kind of remind us, remember how great we were? Remember sometimes you need war. Hitler. And it's always that sort of like, and it's like none of these now are having to do anything with that.
Yeah.
And
we don't really talk about what our role has been since World War II. Because as I was tracing this, like, where did this start? It started after World War II. When they sat down and said, like, okay, this is the American century. We make the rules now. And we never really pulled our troops out of Europe. In fact, that's one of the things that I've been learning by reading stuff like the defense authorization is you look at this Russia stuff and we're all talking about like Russia saying stuff on the internet, like that matters. What matters to me is that we are building up troops. We did it during the Obama administration for the last 2 years in Poland and in the Latvia, and they call them the Baltic states. We've had a massive troop buildup, and what's in this year's NDAA is we're going to do it on the other side of the world too. We're going to do it the Asian side of Russia. So we're surrounding them with troops. And
then weird that a country would go, whoa, wait a minute. Imagine if Canada started stacking up troops on the border and then Mexico started, or Canada put troops on the Mexican border just for their own personal security. Yeah. Wouldn't we as America go, what the fuck are you doing?
Yeah. Or even what if Russia was putting troops in Tijuana and in Canada and making best friends with everyone around us?
The Cuban Missile Crisis. Do you remember that, folks?
Yeah,
we were terrified. How did we react to that? Yeah. It's weird. Well, let me ask you this as we wrap up, because one of the things I try to do on this show is to like at least give people, is there an action to take, or what could they do to try to either get more informed and or let their politicians know I'm not down with this?
Well, I mean, the only thing that I can really see working, I mean, when I think of the section of our government that is supposed to represent us is Congress, and specifically the House of Representatives was always ours. And right now, on both sides of the aisle, these are people that are on board with the whole we control the world thing. We need to open up all these markets. I mean, it's both parties. It's a problem. We need to clean house. So that's the number one thing that I want people to do. And it's actually quite easy. I mean, we have the opportunity in a midterm. Classically, we don't vote in midterms. So anyone who hasn't voted before, you can step in here and make a real difference this year. And we just need to get rid of them. And I don't particularly care who the new blood is that goes in, as long as it's new people, because we've had people like Alaska is represented by one guy, Don Young. He's one of the worst. He's been there for 40 years. Nancy Pelosi has been there my entire life. Dianne Feinstein my entire life. She's running again. She's like 110 years old and she's running again. And she's one of the worst. So it's like, we just need to get new people in there. And as far as like, well, who's going to tell them how things go? It's like, we don't want them to be playing by these same rules. We don't want it, where they have an empty debate chamber and they're across the street dialing for dollars all day.
Let me ask you this, though, to that end, because I agree we need to get the entrenched, the people who've been there for 30, 40 years, the Feinsteins, or whatever. And they're all just like, there's just like pro-choice corporate politicians and pro-life. You know what I mean? Like, there's a handful of issues, but everything else is the same.
And a handful of good people who are in Congress, but I'm willing to lose them in a fire them all type of deal. Like, we're not going to lose anyone that fantastic. It's worth the risk to just be like anti-incumbent is really what I want to see.
Okay, so let me ask you this, go. So let's say this. How do we then? Let's say we get a lot of them out. How do we stay on top of and or prevent them from going down the slippery slope and the campaign trail and getting the corporate donor slides in and goes, hey, I'll help you with your next campaign. You know what I mean? How do we? I mean, I know that's a
huge question.
Right.
That's the thing. Like, we're all trying to figure that out, but I think bribery has to become illegal again. So maybe they make that the one thing. Because if you look at the big umbrella, everything fits underneath that. Because the reason that they do this is because of the campaign contributions, and that's the linchpin of it all. And so if we can make bribery of politicians illegal, then the other issues, I truly believe, will start to work themselves out, because our voices will actually be heard instead of just of our wallets. And so I think maybe if there's one issue we focus on, it's making that illegal.
Okay.
And I don't know if it's public financing of campaigns, although I do like that idea. If you can go out and collect the signatures of 10,000 voters in your district, like, okay, you've just earned the couple $1,000, and if everybody has the same amount to use, you really get to see what they would do with your money. And I like that idea too, because there's a limited amount of money, or at least there should be, as far as tax money is concerned. So to have an even contest to see, like, this is how this person decided to spend it. Like, this person spent all their money on one TV ad, where this person spent it on a bunch of people to go door to door. Like, just to see the different things that could be done, that could be an amazing way to run elections.
So yeah, and so that's a great point. And one of the things I've talked a lot about on the show is support politicians that have, like Tulsi Gabbard, who's openly said, I'm not taking corporate money.
Absolutely.
I'm not taking the super PAC money. So those are great things. And I think, guys, and we've talked about this a lot on the show, and what Jennifer is saying is really the money out of politics. And so support anybody in this 2018 that is not an incumbent and is not an incumbent first and foremost, but definitively not taking corporate money, I think, is the key.
I think that's really key.
Okay.
I really do. But even if you don't have that option, because you don't know who's going to be on your ballot, you're only responsible for one person. So at least show up and pick the lesser of... You do have to pick someone from the ballot. You can't just leave it up to everybody else. And I think that's really important. We need to start with baby steps, and the first one is show up.
Right, and I think I've talked to the people that, I don't know if you're familiar with this organization, Our Voice USA, and they've started this app where they ask you 25 questions and you answer what's important to you. And then, so whatever, you're a progressive and you answer all these questions from a progressive point of view, let's say, and then you're like, here are the candidates running, and they'll say, well, this person is 87% in line with what you believe, and this candidate is 46% in line with what you believe.
That's helpful.
Yeah, so I've done some interviews with them, and they have an app, so something you recommend, I would say for you to try that app and see what you think. And
yeah, I mean, when I vote, I take a day,
Right.
4 or 5 hours, and I use the internet, so that app can help. But things like, Project Vote Smart or Ballotpedia, you can kind of see what's going on in your district. I mean, the internet is a beautiful thing, and so it's actually not that hard to to know your candidates and do it quite quickly. It doesn't have to be.
Cabinetvotes.org is another good one, just so who voted for what.
Yeah, and the other part of that, and why I do what I do, is you also need to know what's in the bills in order to judge whether or not your person should have voted yes or no. So that's the other thing too. Find 5 bills that you're going to judge your person on, really understand them, and then judge their voting performance.
So where do you get the bills? If I wanted to go find out the details of this bill and who voted for it, where do I get them?
That's a great question. My favorite resource is called GovTrack.us. And I've met the guy who created it, and he just takes it straight from the government sources, so there's no one screwing with it. But the way he presents it is so user-friendly. So that's why I like GovTrack US so much, and you can find your, who represents you and how they voted on different bills, and I absolutely love it. And then what they do for me is in my show notes, I outline the bills, and I'll link to the individual provisions, because who am I? So when I tell you this happened, it's like, well, this is where I got it from. Here's exactly where in the bill it says this. And GovTrack allows me to do that too. So it's a really powerful website, and I love it. And yeah, I would use that for sure.
All right, guys, listen to Congressional Dish. Thank you, Jennifer, for being on the show.
Oh, my pleasure. Thanks for having me.
We might do some more interviews in this room.